want to welcome all of you this morning on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Door County. My name is Pat Sisinski. I am the current chair of the League of Women Voters, and I want to welcome all of you again, and thanks for making time to learn this morning. The League is a nonpartisan political activist organization that was born 101 years ago, when women won the right to vote. Our Door County League is over 50 years old, I believe, and one of 20 chapters in Wisconsin. We continue the League's legacy with education as well as advocacy for voting rights, good government, good public policy. We encourage people to vote and to be engaged citizens to keep our democracy working. If you too are interested in working for good governance and for supporting our democracy, consider joining up with us. So having said that, I want to remind you today to vote. Voting is your voice. Remember that our next election is February. One other thing, consider running for office yourself. Our government needs good people. How about you? There are many resources to help you get started. December 1st will be the day to begin taking out nomination papers for local nonpartisan offices being decided in the April election. So think about it. Many thanks to the Kress Pavilion for allowing us the space and opportunity in such a beautiful place to educate our county about this new resource for people with addiction issues. Addiction and mental health issues affect literally every family in some fashion, not only here, but throughout the country. Now I want to say a little word about Eileen Bowen, who is in a way underwriting our place here today. Eileen Bowen was a long-time active League member, League of Women Voters in Door County. She was a very early member and served as president for several years. She was interested in all issues important to the League, and she bravely led many decisive actions. When Eileen died in 2016, family members established a memorial fund in her name. Its purpose is to allow the Door County League to bring quality educational speakers to the area. So we're delighted today to have Eileen's sister-in-law, Kay Bowen Smith, from Arizona, who lives mostly in Arizona, but is up here today. So I'll have a note on housekeeping. I have hearing aids and my own phone just dinged in my ear, but it was a reminder to me to tell you all to put your cell phones on silent, please. The restrooms are back behind where you signed in there by the elevator, and also downstairs if you need to do that. You may have noted that we have people acting as servers, and we're trying to minimize how many people touch the food. So for as we all know, for COVID reasons, we have tried to set up social distancing, and I see you have kind of set yourself up as social distancing. And we ask that you mask when not eating to protect those who may be more vulnerable here due to health conditions. Thank you, and speaking, of course. Did I say there would be door prizes? Be sure at the break, if you haven't already, to sign up and put your name in the basket at the table back there. Renee and Jack Fiedler donated these beautiful arrangements, and we will give them away at the end of the meeting. They're nice for fall. Now, I'd like to go turn off my own phone, and I'd introduce Susan Kohout, a member of our leadership team, who will explain how the League became interested in treatment court from our work on a local study we did of mental health and substance use in Door County. Susan?
right, you should be able to hear me because of my lapel mic. Is everybody okay? Can you hear me? Welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. We are so pleased that this important program can be presented at long last. We are grateful to our presenters for sharing their work with us today. I'd like to begin by reviewing our morning schedule. We'll begin with a panel discussion by 3 local officials who are part of the team responsible for the creation of the Door County Treatment Court. After they have explained the purpose behind the creation of the court, the process of developing it, and its current status, we'll take a 15-minute break to replenish plates and coffee cups. Then we will hear from 2 treatment court graduates who will describe their experiences. Then finally, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and we will adjourn when all the questions are answered, or if for some reason we get till noon, whichever happens first, we will stop. Don't get scared. I think we probably will be done long before that, but we'll see. To set the scene, I want to take you on a journey that begins in 2017. For many years during planning sessions, League members had raised questions about mental health and substance use in our community and what resources were available. As more and more members took an interest, we did some brainstorming as to how to move forward. Eventually, a group of 7 members coalesced into a study group that set the goal of trying to understand how our community addresses mental health and substance use in relation to our criminal justice system, our mental health system, and our informal support systems. We felt that once we understood the process and the community's needs, we could advocate to improve things. Our committee, and I don't know that they're all here today, but many are, and I'd ask that you either stand or at least raise your hand when I call your name. Our committee of 7 consisted of Lisa Barnaby, Helen Bacon, Sandy Brown, Betsy Rosberg, there she is, Susan McIninch, I don't think is here, Seth Wiederanders, and myself. During the next 4 years, we looked at statistics, watched videos, listened to podcasts, and read articles. But most importantly, we interviewed agencies and organizations that interact in some way with the citizens who deal with mental health and substance use, or both. The list of those interviewed included groups from the Sheriff's Department to Help of Door County, the Department of Health and Human Services to Alcoholics Anonymous. The list was not all-inclusive, but we continued interviewing until we felt we had a basic working knowledge of the overall process. We wanted to understand the various ways that someone can come into the systems because of mental health or substance use, or a combination of them, and then the ways each person might move through the systems. Also, what might be the various interactions that they might have in the systems from start to finish. Early in 2019, we interviewed Judges David Weber and D. Todd Ehlers, who told us about their hope that a treatment court could be brought to the county. At that point, a group called the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, I hope I have the name right, of which they were a part, were in the planning stages for such a court. That meeting planted the seed for this presentation, to share with the public the type of resource that could be provided to Door County citizens to help them work toward better outcomes as they dealt with mental health or substance use issues. The study group published their study in September 2020. You will find it on our website. There are 2 copies, this one and another, that will be on that table if you want to take a look at it. Please don't let this walk away though. And there's also half sheets that will tell you how to get to our website, and that you will find the study on it. You will also find a video interview of the 7-person committee explaining the process, and you will find a virtual panel discussion that some of these folks participated in March, kind of introducing the treatment court. It's a fairly readable, it is not a comprehensive detailing of everything we learned. None of us had the stomach to try to put that together. But rather, it is a fairly readable explanation of our process. It lists our resources that we identified, shares our conclusions, as well as community needs that were identified by the various parties we interviewed. Since completing the study, we have begun organizing ourselves to advocate for improved outcomes for the Door community. And one strategy, which you are part of today, is to provide information to the public about services available. Although today's program was scheduled to be the kickoff of the new treatment court, COVID intervened. First scheduled for April 2020, it was delayed several times until now in October 2021, we can finally hear a status report on our already functioning treatment court. So let us begin. We have 3 local panelists that I will introduce to you now, and they will together share with you information about our court. First, Judge David Weber. He has been a circuit court judge in Door County since 2016. From the beginning of his tenure, he has been working with other key leaders to establish a treatment court in Door County. Prior to taking the bench, David was a litigation attorney with Pinkert Law Firm, LLP in Sturgeon Bay for 23 years. He's been active in a variety of community organizations, such as the Door County Economic Development Corporation as president, the Bordui Foundation as a board member, St. John Bosco Catholic School on the Board of Trustees, and the Sturgeon Bay Yacht Club as judge advocate. David, his wife, and their 2 daughters were all born and raised in Sturgeon Bay. Next, District Attorney Colleen Nordin. A native of Sturgeon Bay, Colleen is a graduate of Sturgeon Bay High School. Colleen graduated from Marquette University in 2005 and a bachelor's degree in political science. She graduated from Marquette University Law School in 2008. Colleen began her legal career in private practice, focusing on criminal defense and family law. In 2016, she was elected Door County District Attorney and prosecutes all criminal cases in Door County, including cases involving juveniles, whether a delinquency case or a child in need of protection and services. Colleen, along with the other local criminal justice leaders, has helped establish a pre-arrest diversion program and is currently in the process of establishing a treatment court in Door County. And next, Joe Krebsbach. Joe is the Director of Health and Human Services for the county. He has worked for the county for over 25 years. Joe held several positions in the county, including case manager for community support programs and AODA program coordinator, prior to being appointed director. He has a background in social work and AODA counseling. He received his master's degree in public administration from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in 2012. As director, he oversees an array of services and programs that serve individuals and families who need assistance with issues related to aging, disability, mental health, or substance use. All right. You may begin.
So I guess I'll start. Can everybody hear me? I think I'll just hold this. My name is David Weber. As Susie said, I can tell you we're all very happy to be here this morning to talk to you about the treatment court. I'm not going to get into too much about how it came into being, but I'll just tell you a little bit. I was appointed judge in June of 2016. At that point in time, I didn't know what a treatment court was. I'd never heard of it, never even heard of the concept. But as part of my training, I shadowed judges, and I shadowed a judge in Outagamie County, Judge Metropolis, who oversaw a treatment court. And I witnessed a treatment court with him for the very first time. And from that moment, I became interested in setting up a treatment court, or at least exploring the idea of setting up a treatment court in Door County. And much to my surprise, I found out very quickly that there were already a lot of people in Door County that were interested in the same thing. In fact, had done work toward that end for a number of years. There was an OWI court, what they called an OWI court for a time in Door County. It sort of fizzled out, but I learned that Joe here had been interested in this. As Susie mentioned, he has a background in AODA counseling, he had done, work, and there had been a number of people that had, talked about this. I think in the fall of that same year, Colleen got elected, became the DA in January of 2017. Lo and behold, she was interested in the treatment court. And I knew from my experiences in dealing with Tammy Sternerd, who then was the jailer, she was Lieutenant Sternerd, she was interested in the treatment court. And I talked to Arlie Porter, who was our chief of police in Sturgeon Bay, and he was supportive and interested in the treatment court. So suddenly, in a matter of several months, we had several key people. By key, I mean just people in the necessary positions of power. I hate that word, power. Necessary people that have to be involved, I guess, in this process, who were interested in the treatment court. There was a judge, there was a DA, there was law enforcement, and there was the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, which we'll tell you why that's very important in a bit. So suddenly, sort of the stars aligned, the way I look at it, and this thing started moving. This is an evolutionary process. One of the things I've learned here is you don't just start something like this, decide to do it, and then it comes into being overnight. So because it's an evolutionary process, it's just false to say that it's any one person. It's a confluence of efforts by many people that are beyond this table. I'm thinking of people like Ken Pavick. I'm thinking about Tammy Sternerd. Obviously, I mentioned her, but there's many other people that are involved. So we've had a lot of challenges, and we worked on it for about 3 years steadily to try to bring it into being. We had numerous meetings. I did set up the CJCC, the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, which is a vehicle to get funding. So we went to training. We applied and got a grant for training. So the people at the federal government came to Door County and actually gave us training in the spring of 2019 over the course of several days. We've gone and witnessed treatment courts around, mainly in Brown County. And we've had to develop our policies and procedures. And then, of course, COVID hit, and I think that if we had a lesser committed group, it would have just fizzled out because we couldn't get together. But yet we got together virtually just repeatedly to get our manual together, our policies and procedures. We had to apply for funding, and this is where Joe was instrumental, among other ways, but one of the ways is to get TAD funding, which is Treatment Alternatives and Diversion. That's state funding money, which we had to apply for, and we did get that funding, which was a crucial development in our in the progress of this. That was necessary to pay our coordinator, Kelsey Christensen. She is actually our only really paid person on our team. So I and Colleen and Sheriff Sternerd and certainly the defense lawyers, defense lawyer that's involved. I just wanted to disabuse you if you think we're doing this because we're going to get a bump in pay or something like that. We don't get paid for this. We're doing this because we think it's the right thing to do. And Kelsey does get paid. And I think maybe one of our treatment people gets paid. But the TED funding made that possible because Door County is very fiscally responsible, I've learned. And when you go there and ask for money, you are generally met with frowns and not smiles. I'm happy to tell you that in December of 2020, we took in our very first person in our treatment court. And now we have 5 and we're about to have 6. As of Monday, we will have 6 people in our treatment court. So we've been operating for almost a year, and we want to tell you about that. If this presentation had taken place when it was supposed to, all of this would be looking out into the future, but we have some experience to talk about now. I think Joe, Colleen, and I are going to sort of tag team, and I hope you don't mind the sort of informal way we're going to do this. It seems like an informal crowd. It's not going to be a high-tech presentation, I guarantee you that. And we're going to talk for about an hour, and a couple of things I hope that you can come away with is that you have an idea of what a treatment court is and why we instituted one in Door County, how they work, what are the mechanics of a treatment court, who sits on them, and how does it work. Some of frequently asked questions that people have, and then you're going to hear some first-hand accounts from people who have actually graduated from treatment courts, not ours, one from Winnebago County, Serah, and one from Brown County, Matt. So we are not going to get too far into at least from a technical standpoint, of this whole issue of what is substance abuse, what is the substance abuse disorder, although I don't think any of us has the technical background to do that other than maybe Joe. But I'm here to tell you that all of us in this business who are in the criminal justice system understand that it is real. It is a real problem. And I, as Susie said, was a civil litigation lawyer. I dealt with relatively sophisticated people, mainly fighting about money. And when I took this job, I think I had somewhat stereotypical notions of what people in the criminal justice system were. I learned many of those things from the movies and from television. And I was really shocked, genuinely shocked to learn that the vast majority, I would say more than 50% of the people in the criminal justice system have substance abuse disorders or mental health issues or both. They are not enterprising, evil people trying to scam the system. There are those people. I'm not here to tell you that those people are, don't exist. But the vast majority of people have very significant problems that are associated, at least, with criminal behavior. And again, most of that, or a lot of that, is at least associated with substance abuse. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Colleen to talk about, first, I think a good place to start is the drug trends in Door County. I've had juries come up to me after heroin cases and say, I had no idea that heroin is in Door County. And I say, oh yes, oh yes. So with that, Colleen.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. As was mentioned, I started as DA in 2017, so I can talk about sort of the drug trends that I've seen since starting, but I do have information about the drug trends that were in existence before coming aboard as DA. We know that around 2015, our drug task force started seeing an uptick in what I would consider the more severe drugs: heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl. So prior to that, you would see a lot of the arrests that were being made were marijuana, sometimes MDMA or ecstasy, sometimes cocaine. Now, not that any of those drugs are okay, but in terms of severity and addiction and the collateral consequences that come from substance abuse, when we started seeing heroin and methamphetamine, and now, unfortunately, fentanyl coming into the community, things changed quite a bit. When we first, I think one of our first controlled purchases of heroin was around the 2015 mark, and it's only increased since then. The concerns that come along with that are, like I said, the collateral consequences. When someone is using and addicted to heroin or methamphetamine, it doesn't affect just that person, it affects their family, their children, often can be removed from their home because they're in need of protection and services. They sometimes have to go with family members or into foster care because someone who's in the throes of that addiction really could get to the point where they're unable to truly care for their kids. Often other crimes are committed in order to support that habit, to get funds for that habit. So members of the community will see burglaries tick up, we'll see more thefts, things like that. So now, unfortunately, we've seen some trends. There was a big uptick in heroin, then it went to methamphetamine, back to heroin. Now it's about a little bit of everything, or a lot of everything. And it's incredibly hard to control. And with the introduction of fentanyl into all of these substances, it's incredibly dangerous. We've had overdose deaths in our community. We've had lots of people who have overdosed and had to be brought back by the use of Narcan. Our EMS providers, our ambulance paramedics folks will tell you that they're administering Narcan on a too frequent of a basis, is I guess the way to put it. Our law enforcement officers have Narcan in their vehicles, and it's something that's become more regular than I think most community members are aware of. So dealing with folks by putting them in jail and putting them on probation, as we might have done before with cocaine or marijuana, that doesn't fix the underlying problem. So the new trends and the new patterns that we're seeing need new approaches to dealing with them, and that's what this treatment court is doing, and what treatment courts do just generally.
Thank you. And I will just tell you also that we had a District 8 meeting with our judges. The District 8 is various counties around Door. And we had a police officer speak to us, and fentanyl is in everything now. It's cheap and it's deadly. It's so potent. In fact, pure fentanyl, if you touch it, you'll die. So, but dealers like it because they can get it cheaply and they can stretch it out over a longer dose. They can get many more dosages out of it and sell it. So, and it's just in everything. So it's very scary, and it's here. So how did we deal with criminals in the criminal justice system? So typically what happens is somebody will enter a plea, and then we are supposed to, as judges, prefer to put them on probation. That's our very first preference. That's what we're directed to do. Of course there are exceptions. If it's a very serious felony, a homicide or something like that, if it's a sexual assault or a particularly violent crime, of course there are exceptions. But for most people, we put them on probation. And what does that mean? That means that we withhold sentence of them and put them on probation, let's say for several years, subject to certain conditions. And those conditions are overseen by their probation agent. And some of them are maintain full-time schooling, full-time employment, maintain absolute sobriety, complete what we call a compass evaluation, which is a comprehensive evaluation, and any follow-through recommended by the results of that evaluation, do community service perhaps. And what do these folks do? They meet with their agent on a periodic basis. The least restrictive is maybe 4 times a year. Many times it's more often than that, but typically it's maybe 8 times a year, 12 times a year. And they meet with their agent, and their agent is monitoring them. And many people do well in that system. Many people perform all of the various conditions of their probation, and at the end they are released from their probation. They're dismissed, and they've done all the things that they can do. However, there is a subset of people who don't do very well under that sort of environment, and those are the people that are have a very high substance abuse need. They have what we call a high need. They're very seriously addicted or have a very severe substance abuse disorder. They don't do particularly well because there's not enough supervision. They simply do not have the oversight from the agent that is required. And the problem is if they get revoked from their probation, which is what happens. So if they continually violate their conditions, let's say of absolute sobriety, they're showing up at the agent's office and they're impaired. They don't show up at all. They're supposed to maintain full-time employment. They're nowhere to be found because they're using. The agent was going to revoke their probation and they're going to send them back to me, and then I have to impose a sentence. And I have no choice. When that happens, I have no choice. I can't tell them, hey, look, I'm going to put you back on probation, and this time I mean it, and I want you to follow, what I'm telling you and follow the agent's advice. I don't have that option. I must impose a sentence, and that usually means incarceration, particularly for the more serious offenses. And the problem with incarceration is we just know that it typically doesn't give them the needs that they address the needs that they have. They don't get the programming, they don't get the attention that they need, and they typically stay clean for however long they're in jail or prison, but when they get out, they start using again almost immediately. And the problem with just treatment, as Joe has pointed out, is that addiction is stronger than any sort of motivation to be just on probation. And the treatment court model, which we're going to explain, which is essentially much more oversight, much more intensive oversight than what they get anywhere else, is what helps them ultimately break that cycle. So there is a problem that probation, I'm not here to tell you that probation isn't appropriate. It is for many people. And of course, for the violent people, the very serious people, it's not appropriate in the first place. But there is a group of people that probation just isn't enough supervision. At least that's what we think, and that's what many other people think. So with that, we'll turn to the treatment court model. What happens in a treatment court?
So in order to qualify for our treatment court, the person is charged with a felony. They end up actually being convicted of a felony offense, and then we place them on probation. Judge talked about conditions of probation, and so what we add is that one of the conditions be that they successfully participate and complete treatment court. The types of cases or the types of folks that we would accept are not violent offenders, and they're not commercial or enterprising drug traffickers, right? A drug dealer who gets busted doesn't get to participate in treatment court. But their offense needs to be related somehow to their underlying substance abuse needs. So a burglary, perhaps. They broke into a building to steal items, to then pawn, to use to support their habit. So we place them on probation. As a condition, they are they have to participate in treatment court. They have to go through an application process that Joe can talk about. They're assessed to be sure that they're appropriate for probation, and then, for treatment court. And then we get started with them and meet with them on a weekly basis in the courtroom. But Joe can talk about what it looks like in terms of what they do Monday through Friday with all of the folks at DHS, their counselors, their treatment providers, Kelsey, our coordinator, what that looks like, because they are being interacted with on a daily basis, multiple times per day, perhaps, and then ultimately on Mondays, they come before the judge and the team, and we check in with them on a formal basis in the courtroom on the record with everybody in there. But I think it might make sense for Joe to talk about how we assess them and how we determine who's the right fit for the program.
Good morning, everybody. So I'll just kind of jump in where Colleen was going in terms of the process. So there's a referral made. And there's some discussion about that and some screening before we go to the next step. But that next step is an assessment. And so our treatment court coordinator would meet with that individual. They go through a few different screening processes and tools that we use for the assessment. We're looking for level of addiction. We're looking for how likely are they to repeat and continue to end up in our system. And again, so we screen them out if there were violent offenses or there was drug trafficking or enterprising. And so once we do that screening, that's the first step. From there, the next step is a referral to an alcohol and drug abuse counselor. And we send them there for a more thorough alcohol and drug abuse assessment to determine whether or not there's an addiction. Usually that's fairly clear-cut by the time we get to that point, but it's still part of that process. And so part of that process is also getting people engaged and helping them understand what this treatment court is going to look like. And from that point, those individuals that were doing the assessment, our coordinator, the counselor, and the judge, and Colleen and the rest of the group get back together and they staff that or team that and have a discussion about each individual to determine whether or not they're appropriate, whether or not they're motivated, and at what level. So how do we move them into that process? And so once they're accepted and they're in treatment court, then they continue or they begin the actual treatment process. And that looks different depending on where each individual is at. So we have folks, I think we have 5 in the treatment court right now, and 3 of those individuals are in a residential service center somewhere else. They're doing treatment at a inpatient or a residential facility. They usually go to a fairly intensive inpatient services program, and then they go to a sober living environment. And so other individuals might not need that same level. They might be functioning well enough that they can function and get treatment in our intensive outpatient program, and that's a 3-time-a-week alcohol and drug abuse counseling program. And then people just kind of go through that process. There are phases to our program, and individuals have to move from one phase to another. As Colleen said, they're also going back in front of the judge every week. And so that happens every Monday. In between there, they're seeing that coordinator. Kelsey, her role is to continue to kind of provide case management. So help with things outside of the alcohol and drug abuse treatment realm. Housing, budgeting. Some people need help with food prep and understanding how to do shopping and that kind of stuff. Other people need help with applications for work, building resumes, those kind of things. And so those are some of the services that we provide. They see alcohol and drug abuse counselors through the week. And then each of those people that are involved in providing service report back to the coordinator. And the coordinator prepares a report for the entire team to go through on Mondays when they meet. So they get a written document that says, kind of, here's how Joe's been doing for the past week. Here's where he did well. Here's where he didn't do so well. Maybe he had a relapse. And then the judge addresses that with the individuals. One of the things that's interesting about this, and again, these guys have talked about it a little bit, but in my world, I was an AODA counselor for 20 years before I got into administration. And in that time, one of the things that we knew is that treatment worked well for some people, but not most. Going to jail, in my mind, didn't work for anybody. They didn't get any treatment there. But having these combined, where there is ongoing supervision and we can really help people kind of stay motivated in the beginning part, which is not easy for most folks, that has changed the game for some of the residents or some of the participants that we have in the program. Trying to think of what else I need to say. Judge, you want to talk a little bit about what happens on Mondays at court?
Yeah, so going back to the typical person on probation, they just see their agent. They go to their agent and they'll discuss matters with their agent. In the treatment court, they literally have contact with our coordinator every day, or at least almost every day. So our coordinator is constantly contacting these folks, making sure that they're doing the things that they have to do, and making sure they get to their treatment. making sure they're working. Many of these people have jobs, which is what we want. We want them to stay in the community. And it's just a much more intensive supervision. And as Joe says, on Mondays then, we have our actual court, but before we have the court, we have a meeting of our team. Now, who's on the team? It's me, as the judge, the DA, the public defender. There's a defense lawyer there. Law enforcement, so Tammy is typically there. We have our treatment providers. Also, we have the people from the Department of Corrections. The agents are there. Keep in mind, these people are on probation, okay? We put them on probation the same way that we would put them on probation in any case. But as a condition of their probation, we don't just order that they maintain absolute sobriety or that they do community service or that they do X, Y, or Z. We order that they successfully complete the Door County Treatment Court. And when I take their plea, I grill them on this. I tell them that this isn't going to be easy. And I ask them, are they doing this because they think they're escaping any sort of punishment? Or are they doing this because they think they can get out of something? I remind them that this is going to be the toughest thing that they've ever done in their life, and that it's hard to get into the treatment court. We don't just accept anybody into the treatment court, but it's also hard to get out of the treatment court. Because most of these people, and they're laughing, Matt and Serah are laughing, and I'm sure they can speak to this, but at some point or other, and we've learned this from our folks, they just want to give up. This is hard. Getting straight is a hard thing to do. And they just want to say, well, how can I get out of this? And the answer is they can't, because we're not going to let them. And also we remind them, do you want to go to prison? This is, I think, where Joe was coming from. The downside of them failing treatment court is they are going to get sentenced, they are going to get revoked from probation, and this time they're going to go to prison. And that's a little bit of a motivator and for a lot of people. So I would just talk a little bit, and this is the way this is. It's a kind of a free-flowing discussion. This isn't something that the three of us or our team just worked out. There are standards, there are national standards and state standards. This is an evidence-based process that has been tried hundreds of times. We have something like 100 treatment courts in Wisconsin already. And they vary from specific drug courts, which is what we have. So we treat drug addiction, although mental health is treated along with that. In Green Bay, they have about 5 or 6 what we call specialty courts. They have a veterans court, folks coming back from the war have PTSD. They have a bunch of issues. They have a veterans court. They have very specific drug courts like a heroin court, and Matt can talk to you about that. They have an OWI court. They have a mental health court, and they've been running for years and helping people in this way, essentially giving them hyper supervision. That's basically hyper supervision. But then going back to, I guess, what Joe said, what happens on Monday then? Okay, they come before me. They come before me, and this is, I think, one of the distinguishing features of this type of approach to criminal justice. Most proceedings are very adversarial. They're very contentious, and it's me meting out punishment and sending people to jail or prison or fining them or something like that, and talking to them about why I need to protect the public and why the things that they've committed are very serious, and I need to protect the public against them. In the treatment court, it's designed to be very full of reinforcement. It's not adversarial. I am trying to build a rapport with these folks. Our team is trying to build a rapport with these folks. So we start by asking them, well, how was your week? And they'll tell us, and then I follow up, well, how many days sober do you have? And they'll tell me, and we will all clap. And then we will talk a little bit about their week. And I will, it's my job to sort of know them and understand what they're going through. And at the end, we give them a little reward. And in our treatment court, we give them a fishbowl sticker. And if they get 5 fishbowl stickers, they get a coupon to go to Subway or Pizza Hut. And you laugh at this and you think this is juvenile, but they come to really appreciate this, and it's something that they take pride in. And I can tell you now, having run the treatment court or presided over it for almost a year, that our folks are very skeptical of us at first. They're because nobody's ever treated them like this ever in the court system. Every time they've been in the court system, they know they're in trouble, they know it's not good, and it's not going to end well. And it's like pretty much out of their hands at that point. Whereas in the treatment court, we're kind of telling them that we're here to help them, we care about them, and it kind of is in their hands. They just need to toe the line. They need to do what they have to do. And they're very skeptical at that. They're like, they don't believe it. They're still thinking, well, I got to figure out their angle. What's their angle on this? Why would they be doing this? Yeah.
I wanted to tell a little story about that. One of our first participant who is doing really well, he was somebody when I took office who I saw a lot of in the courtroom. He had multiple cases pending at the same time. He would get another case, he'd get arrested again while out on bond, and I found him to be very frustrating. Like when I knew he was going to be in the courtroom, he always had an attorney. I wanted to throw him in jail and throw away the key. I just was done dealing with him. So I know he didn't like seeing me in the courtroom when he walked in with his attorney. I know we've talked about this since. And when I would see his name again on the docket, I would roll my eyes and say, oh my God, what are we going to do with him? And when he became someone eligible for our treatment court program, one of the things that we've talked about since is how nice it is to work with him in a collaborative way. And I've told him that it's nice to smile and talk with him and be supportive of him, and for him to have some trust in me and the team, which is so different than any experience he had in the courtroom his entire life, starting with his addiction at around age 12 and being in the juvenile system and everything that comes along with that. And he has expressed to us how he still gets nervous a little bit when he comes into the courtroom in person for treatment court, even though he knows how well he's been doing, how supported he is. He gets a little bit of, and I don't want to use PTSD, but he gets a little bit of some nerves walking into the courtroom because before this, he always walked in ready to maybe be taken away in handcuffs, ready to be scolded by one of the judges or by me or whatever that might look like. So it's wonderful to see them transform from not necessarily trusting us at first or trusting that we're actually there to support them, and now learn that we are there to support them. If they stumble, we will work with them to get past that. If they relapse, that's not the end of the game. We just have to figure out how we're going to move forward from there. They're not used to that. So it's a really nice feeling to be able to see that and then see them sort of being able to lean on us if they need to, and to be honest with us when they are having thoughts of using again or did use. One of the things that we do during our staffing meeting that hour before we go into the courtroom when the participants aren't in there is we read up on everything that happened to them that week, whether they had a positive drug test, whether they used again, missed a counseling appointment, didn't participate meaningfully in counseling, lied to a coordinator, missed a probation appointment, or whether they did good things. They made all of their tests, they made all of their phone calls. Some of our participants, all we want them to do is just get up in the morning and call our coordinator. If we can get them to do that, that's a win. Some of them we have higher expectations for because they're further down the process, down the road. But we hear about all the good things that they've had going on during that week, the struggles they've had, the things they're concerned about, you know, housing when they get out of sober living, where are we going to find for them to live? So we talk about everything that's going on in their lives as a team. Judge has to make a decision about whether if they had too many stumbles, meaning, I shouldn't say stumbles, but if there's lying to the team or lying to the coordinator, they might get sanctioned in the courtroom. They may end up having to write an essay or do community service. Sometimes they can be taken into custody and have to sit some jail time. Or we reward them and reinforce everything good that they've been doing. There's a spectrum of responses that we have. There's a spectrum of sanctions, from just calling them out in the courtroom to all the way to jail. There's a spectrum of rewards that we give them. And in those staffings, it's everybody talking and everybody discussing what we should do with that person this week. And they can be heated discussions where I might come in with my prosecutorial style and say, I don't buy it, she's lying, this is not an accident that her test was positive this week, she's lying to us, there's something more here. And maybe the treatment provider will soften me up a little bit and say, well, you need to understand and put yourself in her shoes, and these are the things that went really well this week. So there's a lot of give and take, and me being someone who, it's difficult to change my mind, I find myself changing my mind a lot and being convinced that maybe I have to be a little bit softer on this person. And ultimately the judge makes a decision of what to do, but we really, really get to know them at a level that is, you know, their family dynamics, their relationships, how things are going with their children. When will they get their children back? What can we do to help them make sure that they can get their children back sooner than later? Does anybody know a landlord who's willing to rent to a person who's in treatment court? So we're constantly working together to try to support them. And slowly, little by little, they start to feel that support, and we gain their trust. And you can really see it in them in the courtroom. They can breathe a little bit easier. Their interaction with the judge is much more familiar and honest. So,
Go ahead.
It's kind of exciting stuff, isn't it? I mean, I hear him talk about it and I get all excited about it, because it's just, in my mind, I'll go back to something the judge said, the stars just aligned, right? In my world in 2006, I tried getting something like this going and it didn't happen. And then eventually I moved out of the treatment world, and to see it come back together again and see what's happening with the people that are involved in the program, it's awesome. I will piggyback on just one thing that Colleen said about it's dynamic. We think about people who used to be in our system. They probably had a probation agent and they had an AODA counselor. But the AODA counselor saw them in the office and they did or didn't tell the truth. And a lot of times these folks didn't tell the truth in the beginning because they couldn't. But we now have a team that meets with them every week. We have a group of people that are looking out for their well-being and care about them and want to support them. And in the beginning, they're like, whoa, what are you guys up to? What do you want from me? But this is not a linear process. So there are ups and downs. And the cool thing about it, from my perspective, and he touched on it, and I want to give the judge kudos for this, he rolls with that. In the old world, there was punishment when somebody screwed up. So in my day, in the 80s and 90s, somebody relapsed, they went and sat in jail. Now they relapse, and we're going to come up with some other kind of consequence for them. We're going to come up with some other way to help them learn from this, but we're not going to immediately say, just because you used, we're going to throw you back in jail, because we know that this addiction is a process and the recovery is a process. So it's really, I've had opportunity to watch the judge in court a couple of times and be part of these team meetings, even though I'm not officially on that team at this point. But the dynamics are amazing, and we got some good stuff going on.
Yeah, just a couple of things about the people who come in. They're high-risk people, high-need people. So you don't put a low-level drug user, somebody who has a few joints or something like that, in treatment court. That's not what it's for. We have other programs for that. These are very serious seriously addicted people or people with serious substance abuse. They're facing felonies, as Colleen said. I mean, I think one of the questions we get, or I get sometimes, isn't this soft on crime? Aren't you guys all just kind of, soft here? No, we're not. They have to all plead out to a felony. They're not escaping anything. This is not a diversion program. It's not if they do all the things, then they're going to get their penalty reduced. They got to plead to a felony right up front. Because one of the first things about treatment, as I understand it, you got to accept consequences for what you've done, and that's the consequence. But it's also not soft in the sense that this is a difficult thing for these folks. They get to the point, and I guess Matt and Serah might elucidate that. They get to the point where they'd rather sit in jail or prison because they're being held accountable every single day. We have random drug tests. I mean, that's urinalysis, random. That's a key part of the testing, key part of the supervision. So that they've got to do this. Every one of our folks, maybe not the newer ones, every one of our folks has relapsed already, but they've very quickly gotten back. And as the folks say, we don't sanction them for relapsing. We would sanction them for lying about it. Okay, so and as Joe says, this is not a linear process. This is, anybody who knows about this, people don't just get sober one day and then just remain sober for the rest of their lives. That would be great. It doesn't work that way typically. And it's different for everybody. One of the questions, I'll just touch on a few frequently asked questions, and then I'd like Joe to maybe talk about where we are in terms of some of our challenges in our program, because everyone has everybody has challenges. I talked about the soft on crime, and by the way, I would tell you one of the things I like being involved in the treatment court is that it has bipartisan support. I'm not here to talk about politics, God forbid, but this is one of the few things that I can think of that both sides of the aisle support. I see our representative Joel Kitchens is here. I know that he is supportive of it. I was appointed by Scott Walker. He's probably not the most popular guy in this room, but I talked to him about a year ago, and I talked to him for a while about the treatment court, and he was so supportive of the treatment court. I think everybody basically is supportive of these types of treatment courts, and how many things can you say that about today? But is it cost effective? One of the things we see, and I just want to touch on this briefly, we're talking about the criminal law here today, but I as a judge, I preside as a general jurisdiction judge. I preside over family cases, and I preside over mental health cases and juvenile cases, CHIPS cases, and I see the addiction ravishing all areas of life. So, you've got the department taking children away from people because they can't stay sober. And then they're married or something, and now this affects family law, the family court. So you have a custody dispute. And mental health, So the idea here is if we can get folks sober, I mean, the number of police calls, the number of interventions that the department has to make, and police officers and so on, this is bringing costs down, but it's very hard to quantify this. But one of the anecdotes that Judge Morrison tells over in Marinette County is that some time ago he had 6 babies born in his treatment court that were sober because the women were in the treatment court. And there are statistics showing that a baby that is born addicted to cocaine or whatever costs about $1 million over the course of that person's life for all of the various medical needs and educational needs and other needs, special needs that they typically have. We do have one pregnant woman in our treatment court who is going to give birth any day to a sober baby. And that's wonderful. Let's just, I think we could probably go on for a lot more time, but I think we want to talk about some of the challenges that we do have. And Joe?
Yep. So we're getting close to the time here, so I'll try and go through them. But if you guys have questions, obviously you can ask those. But so the process right now, we got into the judge talked about a TAD grant, or somebody talked about a TAD grant, the Treatment and Alternative Grant. We got into that in the middle of a cycle, which was actually really good for us. So we're in our second year of a cycle, and the cycles are 5 years. So the current state cycle ends at the end of this year, and the funding that we have is through the end of this year. We have now applied for another grant, and if we are awarded that grant, we will get another 5-year grant. And that gives us a couple more years than most counties get, which is fantastic. That grant pays for our coordinator's position. It pays for, we have a half-time counselor that just works with our treatment court folks. Our goal is to eventually get that to full-time. So we've written the grant to get another 5 years. And along the way, we haven't necessarily just found these things out, but they stick out a little more obvious to us. Right now, one of the big problems that we have is a sober living facility in our community for these individuals. So I mentioned that we have 3 that are placed in other counties. One has been out of our county for 11 months now. This individual, we want to get them back here. We want them to be part of our community. We don't have a sober living facility for them to be in. So it's one of the things that we're working on, we're looking at and exploring options for, but it is a big need. Housing in general is a huge need for folks, and you guys know this, but it's huge. We're talking about our one individual who is soon to have a baby, and we can't find an apartment for her to move back into. And there's some challenges that are additional with folks with felonies and drug convictions in terms of finding housing, but housing in our county is a terrible problem. And so those 2 things are those are probably our biggest challenges. The housing issue is probably one of our biggest challenges at the moment. The money and the resource for this, we're trying to figure out. We're already in the process of figuring out which services we can bill for. How do we incorporate into specialized programming where we can generate additional revenue for the services that we're providing for these individuals to support those counselors and case managers when the grant money goes away. So we're already working on that. Again, I'm hopeful that we'll get this new 5-year grant and we'll have a lot more time to figure it out. But we're already starting to do some of that, which I'm encouraged by. It's going pretty well. We are working with the recovery community to try and enhance that and give our folks, as they come back to our community or if they're staying in our community, resources and support within the communities from other individuals who have been through the same life experiences that they have. And again, I would say those challenges, they're not small, they're certainly things that we can work through, but I'm way more encouraged than discouraged or worried about the challenges. We'll figure those things out and we'll keep moving forward in terms of providing resources for these individuals. I would say, and it was touched on twice, in my mind, this is just part of what we need to do in the county. So treatment court is amazing and it's fantastic. We've got a diversion program for people who are earlier on and first getting into their criminal behavior, and we're getting them involved with a case manager and treatment and trying to monitor that so they don't end up further down the road in the system. We are doing that with the kids that we are seeing, and so we're working at kind of rebuilding or building a treatment and recovery community that's a different mindset. We're in rough shape in terms of what's happening with the drug culture here in Door County. Colleen talked about that. I've been here for a long time, And I worked in treatment in other communities before I came here. I saw heroin users, I think I had 3 or 4 back when I was still doing treatment, and that was 2002 to 2008 here. It's much more prevalent now. We are seeing greater impact in our whole human services system, so child welfare and folks being impacted by more significant drug use when Door County's primary problem used to really just be alcohol. So that being said, we've got challenges, but I think we're heading in the right direction in terms of taking care of some of those things.
Just to finalize, this is not for everybody. It's not a panacea, we know that. But just by definition, certain people are not even eligible. Violent people, sex offenders, those sorts of folks are not even eligible. But as Joe said, it's part of a constellation of programs, really, I would think, falling under the heading of collaborative justice. I mean, Sheriff Sternard started something called Operation Fresh Start for folks in jail, in the Door County Jail, to give them the tools they need when they get out, such as working on your GED, getting hooked up with employers. There, as Joe said, there is a diversion program for very low-level offenders, young offenders who are just starting to get into drugs, to, rather than tag them right off the bat when they're young in life with a criminal conviction, maybe giving them counseling and giving them some help, and maybe they can get a second chance and move on in a constructive way. There's a pretrial release. When we used to put cash bail on people's heads, and we still do, and it's appropriate. But for some people, it's appropriate to try to get them out of jail while they're waiting. And we have a number of mechanisms to do that, such as GPS monitoring, alcohol monitoring, and the like, to get them out of jail. And all of these things are just tools. And the treatment court is another tool. It's not for everybody, but we're hoping that it can help a lot of people. I guess, any questions for us? Or do you want to wait till
Let's hold
the
on
end?
the questions.
Okay.
Yeah. We need to take a break. We've been sitting a long time, and you've heard lots of stuff. So we're going to take 15 minutes. It is 10:22, so let's call it at maybe 25 to 11. All right, this is the heart of our presentation. No offense to our 3 panelists here, but this is really what this is about. And we are very grateful to Serah and Matthew for being willing to share their stories with us. I am not going to be given any big background things because they are going to tell you what they have lived. So we have Serah Muinde, did I say it right?
Yes, that's fine.
And she is a graduate of the Winnebago Treatment Court. And Matthew Traver, who is a graduate of the Brown County, and I've learned something today, it's not just the Brown County Treatment Court, it's the Brown County Heroin Treatment Court, correct? And they will come up one after another and, wherever they're comfortable speaking and tell us their stories. And then we will have time for questions afterwards. So, Serah?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I want to just thank the judge, the DA, the drug court team, the League of Women Voters. I'm happy to be here with you all today. On a beautiful day, it looks like in Egg Harbor. So, drug treatment courts are a big part of my life. I'll talk a little bit about where I came from, how I came into the drug court program, what I did after, and how life's like for me right now today. Just a little background on me. I grew up in a normal family, burbs, great education, went to college, great grades. I think I was voted most likely to succeed in high school, which is a total joke, right? But you know what I mean? I did some good things, but who'd have thought, And I don't think my parents ever thought hey, we're going to be living with 2 children with the disease of addiction for the rest of our lives. One of which is still really struggling, but
I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. I started using, I think, when I was 17 years old. And you know, that was when they had those commercials like, this is your brain on drugs and the eggs, right? So I already knew, like, this is not a good idea, okay? This is not a good idea. My dad was an alcoholic, so I thought to myself, well, let's just try the other thing, the drugs. Maybe I can not be addicted to that, right? Just crazy thinking. I can tell you I was like raised in a great home, but every family that I know, every person that I've connected with, they have trauma. There's some things that happen in your life that maybe you don't remember, it's hard to let go of. Your family, it's a family thing, right? Everybody has that. Every family has that. I can tell you as working as a treatment provider, and I can also tell you as being a part of a lot of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and groups like that. Everybody has it, okay? Does everybody want to talk about it? No. You know what I mean? No. So we don't, and we keep those secrets, and those secrets become the perfect breeding ground for addiction to grow. So as I went to a private school in Ohio called the College of Worcester. I got a full scholarship there, and I had been through some trauma in my life. So when I went to school, I really didn't even know how to do my laundry, let alone like communicate with others, because my mom and dad kind of did it all for me, and we had strict rules, and we were kind of sheltered, but my dad was from Kenya, so in the summers we would travel there in the summer. So I didn't realize like all the different dynamics and freedom that came with going to school, and so when I went there, I would say a few weeks before I went there, I tried marijuana for the first time, and it was horrible. You know what I mean? It was just bad experience, and I was like, oh God, I'm never doing that again. And then, but why did I do it, right? When I knew it was wrong? I did it because I wanted to be liked. And that's what I can tell you about a lot of people and why they use drugs or how they come into drug use. We want to be liked. We want to have a connection. And when other kids are doing something and you're the only person not doing it, you're not the cool one, right? So it wasn't even about cool. I just want to be accepted, And I think that came from recovery is about how you feel about yourself. And when you don't feel good about yourself, you look to other groups to be accepted in, right? And so I was looking, and I found this group, right? They were very open with, they were there with open arms, ready to accept me, my money, my behaviors, everything, as time went on and how my addiction grew. So I went to that school, and I actually, some of my behaviors like became pretty prevalent when I was in college, like that attributed to my illness. The total codependency on people, not really looking at myself and having very low self-worth. And not really ever being able to take a compliment. I mean, how many of us, people say, oh, your hair looks really nice, and you're like, oh, it doesn't really look, no, your hair looks nice, and how do you feel taking that compliment? I never could. I still have a hard time with that, But my family looked at success and how you felt about yourself by what you presented on the outside. So as long as everything looked good on the outside, who cares what's going on the inside, right? And there like became this internal war, like within me, like with the drugs and with my moral compass, with family, and I started letting them down like quickly. I didn't graduate from that school. I left there as a senior, and just to tell you kind of a little bit where I was at with how much I needed to be liked, like we all had a senior thesis that was due, and I like did somebody else's and not mine because I just had no self-sense worth. You know what I mean? So when I got home, my parents were so bewildered, like, what is going on? And I looked a little different. I had the dreads and everything, and my mom and dad are pretty square, so they were like, what, and at that time my brother was in prison for being a drug dealer, and so it was just a really hard time for our family. I ended up going to UW-Oshkosh, getting a degree in undergrad degree in urban planning, and when you first go get done with college. You know, most people go into the field that they, you know, have that degree in. I got a job as a bartender. You know what I mean? So you can quickly see, like, how my addiction had grown, you know? My parents were like, why? And I'm just like, just for a little bit. I want to sow, you know, my wild oats and everything. It turned into a lot of trouble. And my disease, you know, it had progressed into other drugs, drinking a lot, cocaine use, a lot of marijuana, amphetamines, like you name it. I'm a polysubstance user, so I like to use all these things at once. You know what I mean? So it's really, really nice, let me tell you. You don't feel anything. And so that's kind of what I did to get through. And I did it a lot. I did it from the morning, the time I woke up until the time I went to sleep. Not only that, I probably didn't sleep for years. You know what I mean? So eventually, like, I made the geographical change, went to Milwaukee. Didn't work. I ended up having a daughter. My daughter's name is Madeline, and I can tell you, unfortunately, like, you know, the whole pregnancy was just really hard with my addiction. You know, I wasn't able to stop, and thank God she's okay. But it was a hard time for my family. My family probably, for the first time, was like, "You're not coming home," you know, and because the door was always open for us to come home, and I remember calling my mom when I was in Milwaukee and saying I need to come home, you know, and she came and got me right away. And my daughter, and I can just remember, like, what state we were in, you know. It was really, really hard. And that's kind of a theme in my life, just asking for help. I don't like doing it. You know what I mean? I was pretty raised to be, like, dependent on a couple people, and those are my parents, and so asking others for help is really difficult for me, but I'm learning. I'm in that learning process again. So anyways, I went home. We didn't know anything about detox or anything like that. It was in 2007. So my mom dropped me off at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting and said, "See you in an hour," you know what I mean? And so I went there and I immediately felt at home. I knew those are my people, but I didn't have the wherewithal to stay clean, you know. Most times, like, at that point in time, my parents were looking at me like, as long as you get a job, you're gonna do great, you're gonna stay sober. The job will never keep you sober. The job will never keep you sober. So I did get a job at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, where my mom worked for 25 years. And I screwed that up, you know what I mean? And so it just went on from there. And my final stint was stealing a large amount of money from my own mother and her reporting it to the police. And that's how I got into drug court. And I will tell you, too, my parents, they were just totally bewildered at this thing. And my dad is an alcoholic. He's active. You know what I mean? There's a lot of drinking that goes on in Wisconsin that nobody wants to talk about. Now that heroin use is killing, like, all these young people, you know, everyone's like, oh my God, drug addiction. Oh my God, alcoholism, first of all, okay? Because alcohol kill you a lot quicker than some of these other things. I mean, a lot more painful than some of these other things, and a lot more people have that illness. You know, we just don't want to talk about it. You know, and that just goes back to my first initial thing when I was saying, do you want to talk about those things that bother you? No, especially in front of people you don't know. Really? Okay. So I got into drug court, and my attorney, well, at that time, I was such a good little addict. I had felonies in multiple counties. So yeah, I wasn't a good criminal. I just like was a complete disaster when that came up. But my mom tried to, like, take back the fact that I stole her money because she was like, oh my God, you could go to jail? And I was like, I got arrested, and that was my first time. And by the way, I was 34 years old at this time. First felony, no priors, nothing, okay? And older, you know, and my daughter came with me home, and she stays with my mom. And I get into treatment court, but before that, my mom suggested that I go down to Winnebago County Health and Human Services and get an assessment to see whether I had a addiction problem. And this lady very nicely said, you qualify. And I went right into treatment at Nova Counseling Services in 2008. So September 26th of 2008 is my first clean date, okay? I stayed in that treatment for 4 months. It was really intense, but you know what I was really excited to know? I learned that addiction was a disease, and that when I start, I can't stop because of the way my brain is built, okay? So that's all somebody had to tell me, because I was kind of a bookie type person, nerdy anyways. So I'm like, oh, that's why I can't do it, right? Besides that it's illegal and wrong and everything else, right? That's kind of like what you have to do with people like us. Like, you have to really, really hit us with something hard. And it's different for everybody else. You know what I mean? There's one thing that kind of clicks you into, oh my God, you know? And so that was the thing. And plus, going to jail, I learned that you had to wear other people's underwear, and I was completely appalled at that, and I was not doing that. So, yeah, I didn't want to do that. And so I chose drug court, and my attorney at the time was like, oh my God, you don't want to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing that. There's no way I'm going to a trial, because I did it, you know what I mean? And the judge at the time that sentenced me happened to be my drug treatment court judge, and I didn't know anything about it. And you talk about a team supporting one person that's trying to get clean and sober. Where is that in the United States of America? There isn't. You know what I mean? There isn't a team of people trying to keep anybody like from doing anything like that, unless it's like a group of doctors, right? So if you have diabetes, right? You go to like a couple different doctors, and you learn that in order to keep your diabetes under control, you need insulin, right? Addiction's the same thing. Okay, in order to keep my addiction at bay, I need to do a couple of things. And if I don't do those couple of things, like go to meetings, work the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, or any AA or NA program that will help me feel better about myself, because that's really what recovery is, right? I told you a long time ago I wanted to be accepted, right? So what does that tell you? I don't have really what it takes inside to really accept myself, right? So that's what my drug court team did for me. They built me up, they got me more treatment, and I got into drug court when I had 4 months clean, you know, and I was terrified. But I can tell you one thing about that group of people. I'm having lunch with my drug court coordinator today when I go back. I mean, we're close. We've been through a lot together, and the coordinator and my case manager are like my best friends. They have rooted me on through this whole process. But there were some things I had to do in drug court. And I was like, well, the UA thing, you know what I mean? So this is something that, like, they say you have to take UAs, but they leave out that you have to take them in front of people, because drug addicts like to, like, mess with tests so they can use. So, yeah, I was like, oh my God, you know, people are watching me go to the bathroom for 2 years. Yeah, it's how long it took. And if that doesn't humble you, I don't know what will. You know what I mean? Because my friends from high school worked at the jail, and they were like, what happened, right? And I was just like, you don't want to know, you know? And people were concerned, you know, because like I was educated, I knew, but it doesn't matter. Addiction does not, it doesn't matter if you're smart, if you're dumb, if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're black, if you're white. The disease is the disease, you know? Anybody can get it. You know, and I had used to the point where I was full-fledged addict. And so, so the one thing I really had to grasp, and you know what's great about the drug court team, is they have to learn about how we think, right? And so how we think is that we have some power when using drugs and alcohol, and we can stop, which is a complete, like, irrational thought, but we really think that. So tomorrow, the intention is that I'm not going to use it. I'm going to go to work, right? But the intention never works. We don't understand why that intention doesn't work, right? So for me, when I went through drug court, I started talking about those things that bothered me, and I was like, they said, oh, Sarah, you have to go to trauma treatment. And I was like, okay, so see a counselor? I don't want to do that, right? But I'm doing it. Well, I had gone the first 2 times, and it was so painful that I didn't want to go the third time, right? And I got up before the judge, and the judge is like, hey, Serah, how was your test? Clean, you know, and they talk about sobriety, and I'm ready, because I'm like feeling great about going to court. I didn't relapse and everything. He goes, how was your counseling session? And I was like, I didn't go. He's like, oh, why not? And I said, because I didn't want to, right? Can't follow rules, typical addict. And so he said, well, let me tell you something about that. You can stay clean and you can do all the right things. If you miss another treatment session with your counselor, bring your toothbrush to court because you're going to jail. No kidding. And I was like, what? You know, and so they not only like cared about the fact that we stayed clean, they cared about the fact that we got to the root of the problems of why we use. Because that's what we have to do to get sober, you know, and that can be a really painful process. So I never missed another session, I'll tell you that. I got one sanction while I was in drug court, because I stayed clean the whole time, and that was on Thanksgiving, and I'll never forget it. I missed calling this number, and it would tell you a color, and then you would go and take a UA, right? Well, it was my first Thanksgiving with my family, and I was really, really nervous. There's a lot of drinking. There's just a lot of addiction in my family. And so I had brought another recovering person, and I was just like on edge for the whole day. And it was my first family gathering. We have a large family. And so I forgot to call. And I got back home, and I'm like, oh my God, they called my color. You know what I mean? I was supposed to go to the jail before I went to Milwaukee, and I'm just like freaking out, right? And so, hey, a missed test means that you're used back in the day, okay? So that means you're dirty. So I got to go to court next week, and everyone's looking at me like, how is the relapse? You know, it's the holidays, perfect time for addicts to relapse, and I didn't, you know? So nobody had a good attitude because, you know, addicts lie. You know, so even when I'm sitting there, I just forgot to call the color thing. Well, I had gained enough trust from the team that they kind of believed what I was saying, but, you know, tests don't lie, people do. So I had to take a test. It was clean, and we went on from there. But I had to wait, in addition to my job I was working at that time, and treatment court, and all the things you have to do in treatment court, because every week I had to see that coordinator, right? I had to do community service if I wasn't working full-time, right? I had to find some time to find my daughter. I had to go to meeting every day, which is an hour out of my day. I had to do fellowship. I had to work my steps and meet with my sponsor every week. And then in addition to that, for the next 2 weeks, I got to do 20 extra hours of community service, right? Yay me. So I was like, I was frantic, you know, but time management is something I didn't have. That's what it taught me. It taught me time management. It taught me how to kind of get on my feet. And my case coordinator, she taught me organization. I mean, she really loved me until I learned how to love myself. And she had a planner, right? And, you know, I used a planner in college and everything, but she had this planner, and I'd see how she'd write in there, appointment to appointment, and finally I got myself a planner, right? Right? And I learned that that's kind of a way that I could conduct my life. And I'm talking about these little things do not occur to you when you have the disease of addiction, because you're thinking about how to get one more. And that is the obsession and compulsion to do that. I mean, it's unreal. Like, I probably haven't slept many, many nights just thinking about how I can get one more, how I can get the money, how I can get to the person, how I can use the drugs, what I'm going to feel like, when I'm going to get the next one after that. That's it. That's what goes through our heads. We don't think about family. We don't think about getting sick. We don't think about job. We don't think about any of that until after we destroyed it all. Okay? And if we do, it's because we're coming to getting sober. Okay? So I got clean in drug court. I never really left drug court. I worked at a treatment center at the time doing outpatient, and then I got a job working at the treatment center where I went through. They created a position for me, and I did billing and marketing and development. And I raised a lot of money for addiction. I created a run because, as you can see, these people are volunteers. They don't get paid. I don't know how you can not pay somebody for changing another person's life, right? Because what you see before you is not what I look like at all. I was so broken. And, you know, I took parenting classes. I mean, I had to do the whole deal. You're all in and you're not. You know, relapse can be part of recovery, but it wasn't a part of mine for over 10 years. And I did a lot of things in that time. I became a clinical therapist. I worked at WRC, which is a mental health prison, and I treated trauma. You know, because I had my own trauma, and I knew what that could do for a person if they were able to work through it. And we had some really cool things in the clinical field that we could do with individuals to treat trauma and reduce symptoms. So I learned what those things were. But at the time, a couple years earlier, my daughter started struggling, and I was in the master's program, and I'm a single mom. She started struggling with drugs and alcohol, and I worked a lot. You know, I have the disease of addiction, so you give me food, you give me work, you give me anything, and I'm gonna do it like until I can't do it anymore, you know what I mean? I was a runner, I was running marathons, and I was running ultras, you know what I mean? It was just crazy. That's what my body and my mind do. But in order to keep that at bay, I communicate with other addicts, and I just try to do the next right thing. And addiction is a spiritual, mental, and physical illness, okay? So physically, I had to get right? I took care of my body, went to the doctors regularly, started taking vitamins, started getting interested in my health and my daughter's health and what we needed to do to, you know, be fit and stay, you know, in the wellness part of life. The emotional part was going to therapy. Being connected with drug court team, they're like my family, you know what I mean? So I can honestly say they kind of raised me, because they say when you start using drugs and alcohol, you really don't, you stop growing. So I started at 17. So really, when I came in a drug court and stopped using, I was like 17 years old in a 35-year-old woman's body. You know what I mean? So yeah, that little girl like came out. I became like interested in doing things like that my drug addiction took away from me, like traveling, and I became really interested in the substance use field, you know, and that's why I went back, I got my master's in social work, and I became a clinical therapist, and I specifically wanted to treat trauma because I knew what that treatment did for me. Unfortunately, at that time, I was not taking care of myself because I was in school, and my daughter started using. It was a difficult time for me. And I had became such a figure in the public eye, like in all these committees. I was on the state drug court board, first participant to be on the state drug court board. And so like, I kind of felt isolated, and people had put me on this pedestal, like, you know what, you're like the super clean woman, you know what I mean? Because my story was ugly. You know, I got clean, like a person like me wasn't supposed to have the illness. You know, born into what I was born into. And that's what people thought. But where my illness took me was to really dark places and around really, really dangerous people. And so I talked about that, and I spoke all over the country. I was asked to speak, and I had a speaker tape. I told my story, and that kept me clean for a long time. Working at Nova kept me clean for a long time. But the reason why I got clean was for my daughter. Okay? So when she starts using, what happens to me? You got it. I didn't know what to do. And I can remember, you know, talking to a couple of my friends saying, you know, I'm in trouble here. I don't know what to do. And I had like emotional strength for a long time, but with that particular thing, I didn't. You know, and I needed a lot of help, and I didn't know how to ask anymore because I hadn't needed help in a long time. Second thing that was going on in my life, I started treating trauma. And it was a pretty intense environment at the Wisconsin Resource Center in Oshkosh. And so I got treated for trauma, but there was something that I kept hidden in my mind that I started having flashbacks about, and I didn't talk to people about. Because I just wanted to do so good at my job, and of course I had to get straight A's in grad school, because part of our disease is like that we're perfectionists. So like if I don't do really good, I'm failing, you know, and I don't even know how to explain that part of our illness, but it makes us like almost, you can't meet your goals like that, you know? But some of those behaviors started coming out in me, and after a while, I relapsed. And when I relapsed, the first time I relapsed, you know, going through Facebook, social media, right? I hardly ever go on that thing anymore, because like, it was looking on there and looking at people's lives and how beautiful they are and comparing them to mine and all this stuff where I felt like I wasn't a part of anymore, right? And I was. So they say when you start using again after having some clean time, you go back right to where you were and it gets even worse. They're right. So my disease took me to just some terrible places. I'm just so happy to be here and alive with you guys today. I'm currently in a sober living. I'm doing trauma treatment through the flashbacks that I had remembered, and it's some really difficult stuff, but I'm doing it one day at a time. My drug court team, I went to inpatient treatment last year out in Arizona, and it looked like a funeral home in my room, because everybody was sending me flowers and everything, and my drug court case coordinator, what'd she send me? Planner, right? She's on it. So yeah, they gave me a lot of hope. I struggled, and I have a little over 3 months clean right now, but I didn't lose everything I had. And I do thank Judge Weber for having me here, because when I told him that I relapsed, I'm sure he was like, uh-oh, you know what I mean? Because what do we do when we relapse? Commit more crimes. Right? So, I mean, and for me, because I did this all around, I did it because I loved it, and it saved my life. It's still saving my life. I created a program like a phase 5. So when drug court graduates graduated, or were about to graduate, there was another program, a phase that they had to go through. And it takes money, right? There was no TAG grant for that, right? I was doing it, volunteering my time, and doing fun things with addicts, like having pizza parties, putting my own money in it as a single mom. Who as a single mom has money for that? But I knew it would get these people clean and change their lives, right? So that fishbowl he's talking about, I got a sucker every time I went to drug court. Man, that sucker, they gave me like a bouquet of them on graduation. Every year when I celebrated my clean time, I got a bouquet of suckers. I was in drug court. You know what I mean? I never really left them. That sucker, that sticker is a big deal. You know what? Because I hadn't been doing really too many things in my life that people told me good job for. And that means a lot. I think like in the end for me, it's all about self-care. You know, slowing things down. It's about self-care. I'm 48 years old, and I look in the mirror and I struggle, you know, with you still are battling this thing, you know, and I wasn't really greeted with a lot of open arms, because people were like, you should have known. And I was like, actually, I didn't, you know. That's what the disease does, you know. And I met a lot of other therapists that relapsed, and I became, I looked for professional programs that I could be involved in, so I wasn't, because when I went to Milwaukee, just as God would have it, just to humble me even more, there were all my clients. I'm like, hey. Yeah, it was very nice. But, you know, in the end, like, I sat next to one of them, and they're like, I can't believe I get to fight this battle with you. And I'm like, hey, I can't believe I get to fight the battle with you. I'm no different. You know, just because I got an education, I got a job, and I did some nice things. You know, I fell down. I need to get back up. You know, and so I really thank you guys for having me here today. I think the drug court team saved my life. That being in your community is a big deal. I always raise money. I created an addiction run that raised money for part of the drug court. So when the graduates, like, they would get a big party, and there was a fund for that. So, because that was all coming out of the judges' pockets, the DA's pockets, and my DA, by the way, good guy. Just to understand what we were going through, I remember he was like, hey, he called me up one day and he goes, can I come to a meeting? I said, heck yeah, come on. So the DA came to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and don't you know he sat next to me and goes, hey, if everybody had this, a place where they could go and talk about their week and their problems, I think the world would be a better place. You know what I mean? And still to this day, he talks about going to that meeting with me. And I just thought it was like a normal thing. But these people know what they're doing. And they not only like help an individual, they get inside their lives. You know, they get inside their hearts, their spirit. They become their family. You know, and I'm so grateful that that program is taking place here. So thanks a lot for having me. Thanks, dear. Here you go.
Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. My name is Matt Traver. I'm 42 years old. I'm a gratefully recovering addict today, and I owe a great part of that to Brown County Heroin Treatment Court. You know, before I get going, I always talk about one thing I'm grateful for and one thing I struggle with, because like that is one thing that treatment court showed me is like, it's not, you know, you got to look at the bad and the good. And like, you know, for a long time I had a lot of things in the struggling column and not so many things that I was grateful for. And then slowly but surely, the struggles became things of moments of gratitude, you know, because when I was in treatment court, you know, I started, I don't want to say winning, but I started doing good. And because I was used to being a loser for so long, that it got uncomfortable and I would self-sabotage. And then treatment court, you know, like my PO, Sherry Hunter out of Brown County, Judge Walsh, the team that accepted me, because they actually denied me the first time, because my treatment court story starts September 22nd of 2016. I woke up, it was pitch black, and I just felt like a sharp pain in my leg. And all of a sudden there was like a strobe light above me. And what had happened was I was at the casino in Green Bay, and that's all I remember. And then somehow I woke up in the storage unit in the basement of an apartment building where I didn't know anybody. So I like literally wandered over there and passed out. Well, some lady went to get something out of her storage, and she thought I was dead in the storage unit. So they called the police, and they kicked me and woke me up. And apparently I tried to turn the light on, and I was laying in broken glass. So I was covered in blood. So it was like an awful scene for this poor lady who found me. And I had warrants because I was a thief. I would shoplift, you know, I'd boost from cars, you know, and then I would get caught for them because I wasn't like a good thief or anything. You know, I got busted on Christmas Eve. I was under the influence of Xanax. I don't remember this, but I saw the video, and and the judge is like, you got something to say? I'm like, I'm not proud of this or whatever, because it's just me knocking over a bunch of shoes and like blatantly stuffing my pockets. Like I thought I was turning away from the camera, and I'm like, you know, like right in front of it. It was just a mess. But anyway, so yeah, they realized I had warrants or whatever. And then when they were going through my duffel bag full of like needles and, you know, stolen GPSs and stuff, they realized I had warrants. And then they found a couple of prescription pills and a dirty needle and a cotton ball with like methamphetamine residue. And so they brought me to jail on the warrants and then charged me with that stuff. And I was there, and they gave me my charges and what I was facing. And then my attorney came and saw me, and he's like, "Yeah, they want to give you 4 years." I'm like, "For that?" And little backstory about me is I'm a registered meth cook in 2 states, here in Wisconsin and Minnesota, which is where my addiction really took, you know, a hard left turn, we'll say. I was 22 years old. My son was just born. And, you know, some people like backtrack and wonder where, you know, like their breaking point was or whatever. And I can tell you exactly where I was, exactly what I was doing. You know, because like all through high school, like I did ecstasy and cocaine, but you know, it was just like a weekend warrior type deal. And, you know, then I met this girl, you know, she was a little bit younger than me. She was in high school. I was about 19 years old, and we started dating. We fell in love, and then she wanted to go to college in Minnesota for culinary arts, so we went to Minnesota to look for apartments. Well, on the trip, you know, we found an apartment like an hour, but we were there for a week. So she got pregnant, a lot of time in the hotel or whatever. And then, so I'm like, this is it, I'm done. Because, I sold cocaine and ecstasy and stuff, but, nothing too crazy. And we moved to Minnesota, and I got a job working for the post office. I was making more money, at 22 years old, than I do now. I was working at a government facility at the airport. And then we just separated, she was, young, I was young, and we were taking a lot of weight. And I just remember, my son was 6 months old, and when kids are teething, you give them something for their teeth. And, Christmas Eve, we decided to call it quits. And she packed up all her stuff and took my son with her. And I was, alone in this apartment in Minneapolis. I didn't really know anybody. And I just remember, as I was picking up stuff, we used to give my son these little refrigerated pickles for his teeth. And then as I started picking up stuff, I found these little pickles all because he'd slam them in his little jumper or whatever. And I remember I lost it. That was I still think about it. It still chokes me up, even though I got my son back now, and me and her are good. But that was just, it was too much for me to bear because it didn't make sense to me. And so I called a buddy of mine from work, and I'm like, dude, I just got to get under the influence of something. I said it differently, but, and he came over and we did some coke, and then it was Christmas Eve, and I was so high I didn't even realize that it was Christmas Eve. And then I'm like, dude, you got to leave me with something. And so he gave me some methamphetamine. He's like, well, this is all I got. I don't know if you want to do this. I'm like, whatever, man. I just don't want to feel anything right now. And then the heat went out, the power went out. I didn't put the lights up on the tree. There's no presents. And that moment right there really broke me. You know what I mean? I felt a mental change in the days to come. I sobered up, and I went back to work. And this is around 9/11. Right after 9/11, and then I actually lived in Eagan, Minnesota, where they caught the 20th hijacker. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but the one that wasn't on the planes or whatever. So Minneapolis, the airport was all on lockdown or whatever. And I was at the airport, and then the stuff OxyClean was made 2 towns over. And then we had the anthrax scare. So we were throwing, and I worked at the sorting center at the post office, and we were throwing packages on the belt, and then things would bust open. There was white substances, so they would shut the airport down. And it turned out it was just OxyClean. It wasn't anthrax or anything, but it was just it was too much for me to bear. You know what I mean? On top of losing my son, so I had a really good idea that I would just go work at a strip club, doing security or whatever, and started meeting a lot of criminal elements, things like that. Dealers coming in and out of the club. I was hanging out with the ladies or whatever. And then I started doing meth more and more to the point where I lost my job. I was going from hotel to hotel, living out of my car. And then I got arrested on my 24th birthday at a Red Roof Inn. I was dating this girl, and I had found some work, at another bar. And I remember I got a room for my birthday, and then I came back, after it was 2:30 in the morning. I just remember pulling in, it's a parking lot like this, and there was cops at every exit. I'm like, man, someone's going to jail. What's going on? And it was me, my girl thought it'd be a really good idea to cram 20 of my closest friends in a little Motel 6 or whatever. And so I'm like, guys, there's 100 cops outside. And everybody threw all their drugs on the floor and left. And left me, I had one shoe on, and 8 cops walked in, and they tried to charge me with everything in the room. I pled out because obviously it wasn't all mine. I'm like, I've just got, back or whatever. But then I couldn't stay at the hotel anymore because they knew what I was up to. So I eventually just lived in my car and became homeless, and then I lost my job, and then I just started panhandling, and then I was smoking crystal meth all the time. And then enough was enough. My PO was like, do you have family that you could stay with somewhere else? Because you're going to die in these streets. And they sent me back to, my godfather came and seen me during all this, and he lives in a small town right outside Madison. And he came and got me. He took me in. He signed, the transfer paperwork. He gave me a job. I was doing really good. Then because I went to high school in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I called one of my old high school buddies. I'm like, hey man, I'm losing my mind out here. I'm so bored. I'm like, we just got to go do something. And he's like, all right. Well, he came and got me, and I walk into this little dive bar, and all my buddies from high school, you know, we're like 24 at this point, but they're still wearing their varsity jackets, you know, and they're doing like lines of cocaine off the bar. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll just do one. Yeah. Well, that first line lasted about 10 months, and then I got revoked, and they sent me back to Minnesota. And then I came back because I started dating this girl in a small town outside of Madison who I met online. And then we started doing like Oxycontin, which eventually led to heroin. And then I went back to the methamphetamine because I met this guy from Las Vegas, and we set up this meth lab in his basement, you know, and it was like right across the street from a grade school, which is always a wise idea. And you know, I just remember we were cooking it in the basement. It was wintertime, and there was like this melted thing of snow around his house from all the vapors. And I'm like, dude, this isn't good. You know, like this is pretty obvious what we're doing. And then the smell. Well, we got caught, you know, and I got blessed or whatever, or I got lucky, I should say, because the cops or the detectives that did the investigation all were under investigation for embezzling money. So a lot of their cases, you know, with the exception of like, because I had to plead out to something, and I was buying my own Sudafed to make my methamphetamine. So I had to plead out to that because their first offer was 18 years in, 18 years out, and they weren't moving because it was the first functioning meth lab in that county, you know. So they were like trying to make an example, like not in my town, and understandably they should, you know. And so I did a year in county, and then I had 2 years paper probation. I you know, navigated my way through that. And during this time when I was on probation, I was pretty good at talking my way out of stuff. Like, I started doing Oxycontin again, and then it just wasn't doing anything. So I started doing heroin, and then, like, sniffing heroin wasn't doing it, so I started shooting heroin. And, you know, like, every time I had to go see my PO, I would go to the emergency room the night before and tell them I hurt my back so they give me some kind of opiate, you know, and I'd be like, that's why, you know, like I said, I was pretty good at like, you know, working the system or whatever, like, and so I completed probation, and I had a choice. I could either move to Miami, where a buddy of mine had his own business or whatever, and then, but I was so addicted to heroin, you know, and then I knew someone in Green Bay that was doing really well, and I was just like, well, if I really want to get, you know, heroin again, Madison's only a couple hours from Green Bay, so I'll go to Green Bay, you know. But I look back at it now, and it was like part of like, you know, my higher powers greater, you know, bigger plan, because like who in their right mind would pick Green Bay over Miami, you know what I mean? Like, and you know, and I'm not a Packer fan either, so like that it made even less sense. But you know, and then like I was doing good out here, you know, I had a job, I was, you know, making like $700-800 a week. And I was, you know, I was smoking weed and like having the occasional beer with some people I met, but it wasn't like crazy. And then like, you know, I got an apartment, and I had a little bit of money saved, and I was with this girl, and I'm like, hey, you know what we should do? We should go to Milwaukee and get some heroin. We haven't done it in forever. We deserve it. We're doing so good. And then she's like, sure, you know, she didn't resist at all. So we drove to Milwaukee, and then, you know, because we stopped, like you said, you're right back where you left off, you know, and so I went back the next day, and the next day, and then I did all the money I had saved, and then the day after that I didn't have any money, so I started getting sick, and then, you know, I went and took out a title loan on my car so I could, you know, I'll just pay it back when I get paid. Well, I took my paycheck, and, you know, slowly but surely I started losing all these things that I worked for, and then now I'm homeless in Green Bay. I'm working at like there's this staffing agency that pays you by the day, and it's nothing, you know, because they know what people, you know, it's either people for beer, you know, drugs or whatever vice you have that day, and so I'm a full-blown heroin addict, but I've got a phone call from a buddy of mine in Rockford. He's like, dude, I'll front you like 20 grams of heroin, and like the price was like, because it's really expensive up here. Down there, it's like dirt cheap. I was getting it for like $60 a gram and selling it up here for like $400. You know, so I was like, fine. I didn't have to worry about money. But I'm homeless doing it, and I'm staying at these little dive hotels, and like, I felt it coming back, like the same old story. I'm gonna get busted in one of these little motels, but this time I have a bunch of heroin or whatever, and I was with this guy. I sold him a bag of heroin the night before, and he overdosed. He like fell out, and I Narcaned him because I stayed with that on me or whatever. And he came to, and he left. And then like I remember I was out of dope, and I had to run to Rockford, but I was starting to get sick, so I hit this guy up. And he's like, yeah, come. He's like, I got a couple shots for you and your girl or whatever. I'm like, all right, cool, I'll get you when I get back. Well, little did I know that he just got done doing a controlled buy and was sitting next to the DTF, the Drug Task Force, when I called him. So they were like, yeah, get him through, So we meet up with the guy. He gets in the car. We go park. They let us shoot up the drugs, which, didn't make any sense to me. The cops did. And then they rushed the car at gunpoint. And at this point, my car was like damaged on this side. Like I had a plastic bag over the window, and he's like, roll the window down. I'm like, it's a plastic bag, dude, So he like reaches in, slams me on the pavement, chipped my teeth or whatever, and then they took me to jail, and then they charged me with attempted solicitation with intent to deliver. And I mean, I know I was under the influence of drugs or whatever, but that thing just came, like, you're a lawyer, you look confused right now. I'm like, I either tried to buy it or I tried to sell it. Like, how can you do that? And my lawyer's like, I've never heard of this either, and he's like, but because of your record, they're going to let it stick. And that was punishable by 2 years. And they're like, well, if you want to work for us, like telling on people, set people, I'm like, I'm not doing that. Nope. And they're like, all right, well, and I'm like, there's no way this is going to stick. And, but then 2 years later, I'm really heavily into the drug game. Like this point, I'm doing like crystal meth and heroin. And at this point, every drug I'm under the influence of goes through a needle. And, like I'm just walking around in my own filth. I'm like begging for change because that car that had the plastic bag for window got impounded. So now I'm like, on foot with just a book bag. I'm a homeless drug addict. And I'm okay doing it, and like I was comfortable just with that lifestyle because I was so, just all I cared about was getting more, getting the next one. And then I stumbled in it, I went to the casino. Someone said they had some dope for me. I remember that, and I just remember storming out, and that's all I remember. And then that's when I got woke up by the police, and they realized that I had all these little ticky-tack warrants in like Jefferson County, Rock County, which is, on the state line by Illinois. And my lawyer's like, yeah, they want to give you 4 years in prison. I'm like, I didn't even have that much. And, they're like, with your record, you dodged that meth lab charge. The state, the county got wind of that, so they want to lay you down. And I'm like, there's got to be something we can do. There's no way, And he's like, well, have you ever heard of drug court? And I've never heard of drug court, And I was still detoxing pretty hard. And he's like, so I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what they'll do is they'll let you out. And that's all I heard after that. I'm like, I can get out? And he's like, yeah, they'll let you out. And he's like, but, and you could tell he was losing me. He's like, hey, seriously, you need to hear the rest of this. And he's like, but you'll be on probation. You will have to do treatment, this and that, the drug testing. I'm like, but I'll get out. And he's like, yeah, dude, you'll get out. So I applied, they did the interview, and because of my meth lab charge, like because in some instances, having a meth lab is considered a violent crime. Not because of the crime that it generates, like the impact it has in the community. So they denied me the first time. And then I was in about 3 months, and I'm waiting, because they didn't actually, like, my case wasn't moving forward, and they were, they had knowledge of my involvement and other stuff, and they were just making me, because what they wanted me to do was start telling on people. So they were like, just let them sit here. And so I applied again, and met Judge Walsh, and he's like, tell me one good reason why I should accept you, because like on paper you're a runner, this and that, like you just don't seem like a good candidate for this. I'm like, because I'm just done. Like this lifestyle doesn't serve me anymore. I'm like, you guys, I'm like, because I've been in and out of jail. I was 39 at this point. I'm 42 now. I'm like, or 38, excuse me. I'm like, I've been in and out of jail since I was 28. The Department of Corrections locking me up and letting me back out hasn't corrected anything, And I'm like, I need something, different. And he's like, all right, we'll roll the dice on you. But he's like, I'll lay you down. He's like, don't waste my time. You're taking a spot for someone that might want to do good. And I was like, all right. So they stamped my form, they let me out. Then they had, another county had a hold on me. So they came and got me, they brought me to Rock County. I sat my 40 days for shoplifting on Christmas Eve. Then another county had a hold on me for a criminal trespass to a dwelling. I fell asleep in someone's abandoned trailer, on heroin or whatever. And so I got 4 months for that, and then they let me out. And then I'm free and clear, and I'm like, all right, so I'll go to Brown County and turn myself in. So I take the bus home. It was like midnight when I got home, so I'm like, I'll just go to the casino, which I'm banned for life from, by the way. And I run into someone that I used to run the streets with pretty hard. He's like, hey man, come to the room with me, because this is a big one. And I mean, like tables like this, there was 2 of them, and there was just methamphetamine as far as you could see. And he throws me 2 big bags like this. He's like, welcome home. And I look for a needle. He throws me one of them, and I'm like literally like getting ready. He's like, wait a minute, don't you got to turn yourself into drug court? I'm like, not anymore, And so I went on the run again, and then I got picked up. I had another warrant in another county that I forgot about. They let me out. This girl I was dating at the time bonded me out in Rock County. I was out 3 days. We went to the Tundra Lodge in Green Bay. I got an OWI on heroin, meth, and Xanax bars. I was on bond for 2 days. She paid $5,000 to get me out. And I remember being pulled over, because I just remember I got on the highway. And as soon as I got on the highway, I just was like, I need to get off the highway, But by the time I got off the highway, they probably got 30 phone calls about my driving. And I mean, I got off the next exit. There was 3 cops waiting for me, and I'm like, listen, man, you guys got to get me out of here. Take me to jail. And they're like, why? I'm like, the lady whose car this is, when she gets here, it's going to be a whole other crime scene. She just bonded me out. And then I told them her name. And they're like, yeah, we'll get you out of here, because she's known, And so I did that. And then when I was waiting to get bonded out for my OWI in Manitowoc County, someone from Brown County, I've never seen the lady before. I've never seen her since. I don't know where she came from. I don't know where she went, but she was like, I'm waiting to go to court, and I'm cuffed up to the bench, and she's like, hi, I'm so-and-so from Brown County. I'm like, okay. She's like, listen, technically we can't kick you out because you haven't started the program yet. However, if you don't turn yourself in, we don't want you to turn yourself in because we want to lock you up forever. And she got right here. And I remember, I felt like she was going to hit me in my face. And I'm like, guard, help, but she scared me straight. I needed that, I'm like, okay. So they let me out. I go to, Brown County Probation and Parole. I meet my PO for the first time, and it was Thursday at 4:15. And I'm like, and I have real bad anxiety, even to this day. So imagine me 3 days sober or whatever, freaking out because I'm thinking I'm going to get kicked out of treatment court, go to prison. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Matt. She's like, oh, yeah, we've been waiting on you or whatever. And I was so shaky and nervous. She's like, you just got to come to court tomorrow because we have courts on Fridays, And she's like, you're freaking me out. You got to get out of here. I'm trying to go home, and you're distracting me. But I'll see you in court tomorrow. And then I remember the judge was like, oh, look who finally decided to show up. I'm like, yeah, I took the scenic route. He's like, yeah, I'll stay. And and then they called me up, and he's like, clean, sober, and then they started clapping, because I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, what the hell, because no one's ever clapped for anything I've ever done, and since I was a kid in a school play or something. I thought a Packer dude walked in, and I'm like, why is everybody clapping? Because your sobriety needs to be celebrated. I'm like, okay, and that resonated with that held weight, I'm like, okay, yeah. He's like, because every day that you're clean and sober, especially the way you get down, is a miracle. So celebrate them. I'm like, all right, man, okay. And then they introduced me to the team, and at this point, I was just like, I'm going to eventually fail. They're like, I'm the judge. I'm like, that's the guy who's going to sentence me. This is your PO. This is the one who's going to revoke me. There's a cop on the team. Like, he's the one who's going to cuff me up, and my case manager, that's the one who's going to write a recommendation for my sentence, and then I was freaked out anyway. And then, the participants that were already there, one by one, they all went to jail for some, I didn't know the circumstances. I just watched them all go to jail. I'm like, wow, these guys aren't playing, but they all were fraternizing and not hanging out, because you got to get permission to I don't know if that's how it is here, but to interact with other participants, you have to get permission or be at recovery setting, but yeah, they were just hanging out and, you know, flipping the program. I didn't know that, so I'm like, oh my God, these people are for real. But, you know, and then I started really, I was going to the meetings, I was doing my IOP, but I was half-assing it. I was doing just enough to stay out of jail. And I remember I made it through Christmas, I made it through New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and then I was with a girl who was still using. So on January 2nd, I'm like, you know what? Anything is better than this. I'll just kick myself out of this program. I'll go to jail, you know, but I'm gonna get high as a kite before I do it. So I called a buddy of mine, got some dope. It was January 2nd of 2018, and I remember I got so high that like I parked somewhere, and I don't know how this even came to be, but I was scheduled to go to IOP the next day. Well, I was in the parking lot of IOP, and I had no idea, you know, and I called my counselor. I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling well, and I look up, and she's looking at me through the window. She's like, I can see you, dude. Like, you know, I'm like, oh my God. So I screech out of there. I'm at the first stop sign, which is like half a block away. My PO is calling me, and she's like, get your ass in here, dude. And I'm like, I'm not coming in today. I'm too high to sit in a little room. I'm sorry, you know, but I'll be. And then court was the next day, so she's like, all right, if you don't come in tomorrow, I can't do anything for you. I need you to trust me that if you come in tomorrow, we can work with you. But if you don't, we're going to kick you out of the program, and I promise you that 4 years you were looking at is going to seem like, you know, you're going to wish you took it, you know. So I took her at her word. I went in there, and they called a bunch of people up before me, let me sweat it out a little bit. And, you know, like when they take people away, there's guards there. Well, I didn't see him. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not in trouble, you know. And then he called me up. He's like, yeah, so Matt, what happened? I'm like, I relapsed. He's like, okay. Why didn't you turn yourself into your PO? I was really high, Your Honor. You know, I didn't want to sit in a little room, and it would have been bad. But I'm here now, so whatever you got to do, I'm like, if you're going to terminate me, I'm ready to own up to it. You know, he's like, because you came in, we're not going to terminate you, but what we're going to do is we're going to sanction you for a week. And when you get out, you're going to be on GPS, you know, which was really fair, you know, because I have a history of running. Like, they could have easily just done away with me. He's like, you were doing really good. I think I had 42 days clean, you know, or out time or whatever you want to call it. And then that week sanction, because I've done, you know, over 6 years, you know, collectively in incarcerated settings. But, like, that week, that guy that I met at the casino that was like, here, man, he got caught and he got sentenced to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. And I saw him in the hallway because I went to like the, you know, church, and he was coming from somewhere else. And he's like, yeah, man, they laid me down for 20 years. He's like, dude, this lifestyle isn't for you. Not cut your BS out. And I'm like, okay, dude, whatever. And we go back to our pods, and then they lock us down. You know what I'm saying? And then like they're like, everybody lock in yourselves. Well, we get up for breakfast the next morning, and the guy that I saw in the hallway went in his cell and hung himself. And he was a buddy of mine, you know, like we were using buddies, but he was like an actual friend of mine, you know, like we were buddies, you know, we were friends. It wasn't like using stuff, we were friends. And I remember sitting there looking at my food, that nasty little jail tray. You know, jails smell the same, they all got that little funk to them. And then I can hear all the storytellers there, like, I got this, I got that, and I'm like, I'm just looking around, and I'm like, dude, and I'm thinking about my friend. I'm like, man, this cannot be how my story ends. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't how the last thing I'm gonna see. There's no effing way. So they let me out, they put me on the GPS, and I was just like, I'm all in, man. You know what I mean? And then I went to IOP, and I had this counselor, Danilo. He said things once a week that saved my life. He said the right thing at the right time, and he told me, he's like, you're an addict, dude. You suck at moderation. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be all in. He's like, I bet you were the kind of addict, dude, in the Green Bay snow, would wear like slippers and whatever shirt you could find, and you would walk from the east side to the west side with $20 to just get normal. I'm like, yep. He's like, okay, so getting to a meeting a couple of times a week with no car shouldn't be an issue. I'm like, okay, all right, dude, I hear you. You know, and then I left that girl, and I moved into sober living, which I resisted for so long because, like, when you first get sober, you think your recovery and you're successful. You know, the measure of your success is like material. You know, at least I did, because like from the world which I came, you know, you gotta have a nice car, you gotta have jewelry or shoes or whatever, and it's all nonsense, you know. But I was not working on my inner condition, and then that girl I was with that was using, the relationship ended abruptly, and I moved into the Oxford House in Green Bay. And one of my roommates there was someone I used to run the streets with really hard. He was actually in the same program I was. He was in phase 4. I think I was in phase 2 at this point. And just seeing him do it gave me hope, you know. And then like I had the camaraderie of like people that wanted to see me do good for no reason but just to see me do good, you know. Because when you're out there using and running the streets with like, you know, criminal elements or shady characters or however you want to, you know, label them, they always want to get what they can from you and then discard you. Well, you know, so it took me a while to get used to that. But over time, you know, I laid back and observed, and I saw who was really about it. Because this was my life now. I had to save it. And, you know, and then I started like you said with the planner, that thing became my best friend, because like, I remember when they let me out, like it was like I just woke up from a coma. Like I knew my name and like my birthday and some of my social security number, but that's all the information I really could remember. And like, I remember I went to my PO and she's like, well, you gotta get a job because you're phasing out. I'm like, how do I do that? You know, because I was self-employed for so long. And she's like, well, most places have little pieces of paper and you write down your stuff and you give them back and they might call you. They might not, you know, or whatever. But, and like just the little simple things like that escaped me. But like, you know, treatment court gave me, like baby stepped me through the process of becoming a functioning member of society, you know. And then once like I got comfortable and like acclimated to like going to work and going to meetings and like comfortable in my own skin again, then it got stagnant for a while. But I've seen so many people like, you know, they'll get their year chip or their 18 months or their 2 years and they think it's like a finish line. You know, same thing with treatment court. They'll get their diploma. They're like, this is it, I'm recovered. It's not true. You know what I mean? Like, you can't take a day off. Some days you can take it a little lighter than others, but like, I've seen so many people just like not, you know, stay diligent and stay with it. And I've learned from those people, and I don't like saying that I'm grateful that I've learned from their mistakes, but I appreciate that I learned from their mistakes. You know, I just, you know, like and then like once that came about, you know, right before I graduated in July of 2019, I was the 29th graduate, you know, and then I moved out of sober living, I got my own place, and then you know, like I just remember like the support and love that like treatment court showed me, like the team, you know, like, because I remember, you know, like the first time I saw someone graduate was like when I had to move into sober living and my mom came up. You know, and my mom, when she like stopped talking to me forever, and like she, you know, because they encourage your family to come, and my mom came, and I just put her through the ringer for 20 years, you know, using heroin and meth and just like lying to her and like, you know, getting over on her for dope money, and she just thought I was on probation again. She had no idea what drug court was, and she saw like the process, you know, how you doing today, and then like, you know, and it's funny you talked about the fishbowl or whatever, like that was like the new addiction for me. Like when I got the fishbowl, I felt like I won like Willy Wonka's golden ticket, you know, because like I worked for it, you know, as silly as it sounds, I earned that, you know what I mean? For so long I didn't earn those things. I just took them or whatever. So like that $10 sub was the best tasting sub I ever had, you know, like I earned this, I worked for this. And, you know, my mom saw me get that and I'm like, look, I got a $10 card. And she's like, okay, I'll buy lunch or whatever. I'm like, no, you don't understand, I earned this. And then like she saw that my friend Ashley graduate, and then like we get in the car and, you know, I'm like, so where are we gonna go? And I just feel her, she grabs my hand really hard and I look over and she's like bawling, like just weeping, and I'm like, what is happening right now? And she's like, you're gonna be okay, you're gonna make it. I didn't know that this was what's going on. She's like, you're gonna make it. And treatment court gave me that moment with my mom, because for so long, my mom was just like, she told me, like my mom, you know, she lives in Illinois, so she like drinks wine, does, you know, legal marijuana or whatever, and she told me that started because she couldn't answer her phone anymore. because she was worried that it was going to be the call that I was going to die, you know. And then like, so she, like, once I was in jail, she'd be like, yep, you're staying there. I know you're fine in there, you know. And like, just that moment with my mom. And then I always joke about this, but it's serious too. I have a son, he's 20. And when I first got sober, you know, because he's seen me like shoot up, I actually got custody of him, and then I lost it because, you know, my addiction overruled everything. And he and I got our license in the same year, and he graduated high school the same year I graduated court. And I'm like, well, if this isn't a kick in the stones of humility, like, I got my license and my graduation the same year as my 18-year-old son, wow. You know, but like, it really gave me perspective, you know, because like, he didn't talk to me for a year of me being sober because he had heard it all before, you know, the broken promises, the I'm sorry's, it'll be different this time. And he told my mom, he's like, I got to see some real progress because I can't get my hopes up that my dad's going to figure it out. And then, you know, he called me about 6 months in, and he's like, how's it going, Dad, you know, and he's like, listen, don't think that we're all good, you know. He's like, just keep doing what you're doing, and I'll start coming around. And he's like, I'll tell you what, if you graduate, you can come to mine and I'll go to yours. I was like, bet, you know, and that just gave me all the motivation I needed, you know, and like, and I look at him too, and he's got that addict stuff in him but he used it like for good. Like, he's a personal trainer, and like, I remember when he was like coming, you know, like 12, 13, I'm like, you want to be like your dad? He's like, absolutely not, you know, and at first I was like super offended. But then I'm like, oh, wait, he understands. You know, all right, cool, man. Well, if you got to learn from my mistakes to be a better person, so be it. And, you know, like, I just, you know, I'm so grateful for the treatment court program, you know, like, because it made me took a long look at, like, stuff that I had suppressed so long with drugs and alcohol. Like, when I was in IOP, they make you do, like, it's a lifeline or a timeline. You know, it's where you talk about every major point or incident in your life that you can think of. And then I got... You know, and I started unearthing a lot of stuff, and then I got to the programs of like Narcotics Anonymous and Crystal Meth Anonymous and Heroin Anonymous, excuse me. And, you know, I didn't realize what a spiritual like void I had inside my life, you know, and people get it confused too, like spirituality and religion, they're not the same thing. You know, like spirituality to me is my ability to center myself when things are bad, and that's the one thing that I appreciate every day is like, when you get clean and sober off drugs and alcohol, it's not every day is going to be sunshine and rainbows, but with the tools that treatment court gives you, you can deal with those bad days and not put your recovery and ultimately your life in jeopardy. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then like, that's why when Mark, the guy from Brown County that like set all this up, he called me, I thought I was in trouble. You know, I'm like, what did I do? I'm like, what popped up? You know, and he's like, no, man, we just need you to, we would like you to do us a solid and, you know, go up to Door County. I'm like, yeah, whatever you guys need. You know, like, seriously, you guys saved my life. Whatever you guys need. And I try to give back. There's people that are into the program, you know, they're brand new, and like my LP will be like, hey, can I have this guy call you? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Because so many people did it for me. Like, you know, they say it takes like a village to raise a kid. Well, it took a treatment court and a couple of fellowships and like, you know, a lot of patience with, you know, all of Brown County to get me back to where I am. And I'm still, you know, and I don't have everything figured out, and I tell a lot of people this too, like, I'm unstable on a good day at best, you know, like, but like, I know how to like dial it back and like keep myself grounded, and like, I have a career now, like, I actually work for the Kress family in Green Bay, you know, and like, and I'll tell people at my job, you know, my story, they're like, how did you get in here? I'm like, I don't know, but don't go spreading it around, you know, and, but, you know, and then like, I'm, you know, like, and that's another thing that treatment court taught me is like, you know, like in recovery, you got to take things 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. But, you know, you got to think big picture too, like plan for your future. You know, like my first car, I got it from one of those low credit places, you know, it was a piece of junk, and I was paying like, I could have been rocking a Mercedes, you know, like with the money I was paying on it. But my PO was like, listen, in 3 years when you pay this thing off, your credit will be better. You can go get a different one. You know what I mean? And it taught me to like, you know, work on my goals. And then like she also told me like, once you achieve a goal, enjoy it for a moment and then set a new one, you know, and you'll keep making progress. And like, because you have that addictive nature, that addict gene or whatever. So you got to be doing something all the time, or you're going to, you know, you're going to go back to, you know, being stuck in addiction, or you're going to get complacent, and then you're going to start tricking yourself. Because like, I'm Jekyll and Hyde all the way, you know, like like when I relapsed, I remember, because I had a house and I had money in the bank and I had, you know, money on me and I had a car, and like when I looked at my last little bit, I was thinking about who to rob. But I had money in my bank and I'm like, where can I go hang out? It's like, I have a house, but like because it was so ingrained of, you know, when I was using that, my mind went right back to that spot. You know, I'm like, I gotta rob somebody, because that was just who I was when I was using. So the moment I went back to using, I went back to that train of thought, you know. And then like, when I first started doing my random testing, the girl I was with at the time, I grabbed my phone and my keys and my wallet, and I'd be like, I know I'm forgetting something. And my girlfriend was like, well, this is where you go in the bathroom and shoot up, you know. And I was like, holy cow, man. Just to, you know, and like the ability to like take 20 years of like active addiction and like the routine of it, the, you know, the ritual of it, you know, because like I used to be an intravenous drug user, and that's a whole nother ritual in itself. You got to set yourself up, do this, you know what I mean? And to unlearn all that and just be able to walk out of the house without having to do all of that, not even get high, just to set all that stuff up, like, it's amazing to me, you know, like, and it took me a long time to get there, but now I don't even think twice about it. Like, I've shot up in every bathroom in Green Bay, and like for a long time I couldn't go to like every gas station, you know, or like certain, you know, grocery stores, because I just had like these triggers. But like through treatment court and the resources and the tools that they gave me, I can walk anywhere now. Like I go into drug houses and grab people and bring them to treatment now, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that for like pats on the back, but I'm just saying without treatment court, I wouldn't be in a position to do those things. You know, like they really gave me my life back, and then they gave me a life worth living back. You know, and like I'm so grateful that they accepted me, because there were so many times they could have kicked me out or not even let me start, or just, you know what I'm saying? Like, but they rolled the dice and they took a huge risk. And I, you know, like, and I always think about that when I think about doing something not so smart, you know, because like, and it's not that I owe them anything, but I do owe them everything, if that makes any sense. You know, like, I just, like, without it, and if it can help someone like me, it can help anybody. You know, like, if you go, like, because I used to do heroin and meth towards the last 3 years of my addiction every day. Like, if you go look at my mugshots, I got one eye open and one eye shut. Like, it looks like half of me's on heroin and half of me's on ice. But, like, what's probably happening is I'm about to have a stroke. You know what I mean? And, it, like, just to stop being that methed out monster, that evil person, you know, treatment court gave me those tools, and, you know, brought me back into the sunlight of the spirit. You know, I just, I can't express my gratitude for this program enough, and it's so cool that you guys have this here, you know, like, and, you know, anything you guys need, or, you know, if you need someone to, like, I'll be more than happy to work with you guys, help you guys, because, like, I have that nonprofit that I was talking to you about. We're trying to open sober livings, you know, because, like, one of the main things for me, like, when people get out of prison or jail and they say they got to start court or whatever, just having a place to lay your head is a huge burden, you know, removed. Like having a place to, you know, just put food away and wash your clothes, you know. So that's what we're trying to do with, you know, what I'm working on right now. And I wouldn't be able to do that without treatment court, you know. I don't know, that's pretty much all I have, so.
Thank you so much to the both of you for sharing your stories. We used a lot of time telling a lot of really good information. I think we might have time for one or maybe two questions. I don't know. Give me the high sign, Pat. Okay. Is there a question? Pat, you want to do this? And then you guys can pass this mic to whoever is supposed to answer it.
Okay, I have a question and I'll roll it into two. The first one is for you all. You mentioned that people can go to out treatment or in treatment, and who pays for that, or how do they get that? And the other question for you guys is, you mentioned your mom drinks wine and does recreational pot in Illinois, and how does that affect you, or what are your views on knowing that there's states right next door where it's legal for something that you've been battling, and I'm just curious about your views, or how does it affect you? And then yours is, who pays for the in treatment or out treatment? Thank you.
I'll cover the treatment part. The county actually funds those services for people. That doesn't mean that they're not on the hook, at least at some level, for it. We do everything we can to make it as...
Most can't afford it.
Correct. We do everything we can to make it as inexpensive as possible. So some of our TAD grant can go towards those services. We have other grants that we use towards supporting people in that. But the county pays that, and some of it is tax levy and some of it is grant money.
Yeah, it took me 4 years to pay that back, that $8,000. But you know what? It's the best $8,000 I ever spent. As far as like other places and the legalization of this and that, like I learned early on, like I don't need to know if you guys understand what I have, but I need to understand, like it's a monster. And if I give my disease the credit it deserves, none of that matters. You know, and you can get clean really anywhere if you want sobriety. You really can.
Yeah, like for me, like there's I live in Green Bay. Drinking's very accepted there. Even the neighborhood I live in, there's drug dealers pretty, they're around. And it just got to a point where the need, like, for drugs and alcohol was just lifted for me, with the tools from this program and the people in the fellowships. It took me a while to get there, but it's not even an issue. Like, it doesn't cross my mind. Like, the mental obsession has been lifted and the physical craving was taken from me, through a lot of hard work and,
Okay.
Any other questions?
One last question, because we promised we'd have you out by noon, and it's going to be close.
Thank you. These are funding questions to whomever it is. Joel, you mentioned the TAD grant. You've got one more year on that, and then you've applied for a 5-year. Sounds like if that didn't come through, this whole thing would die. So my question is possibly two-part here. One, are any of the current bills in the legislature deal with substance abuse or mental health? Would any of that help or can come to you? Or is there, can the state do anything about this? I mean, is it something that, let's say we had a representative here who wanted to put a bill together, would give them some guidance about how to do that or what the need would be?
Well, I'm going to skip the politics part of that question. And the state has funding available. That's what the Treatment Alternatives Diversion Program is. So the TAD grants that we're going for is state money that's made available. Every 5 years they do something called a competitive process. So counties then we're all submitting our applications and trying to get the best score we can to get that. It's not a guarantee, but there's an in at this point for us because we've already been getting funding for 2 years. The folks at the state don't want to see this die in Door County, and they know that we're not at a point yet where we can figure out how to fund it ourselves. So I'm optimistic about getting that funding. And additional funding was put into the budget this year for both TAD grants and diversion grants. They're the same. They're coming through 2 different avenues, but there's additional funding in both of those programs this year. So, I mean, that's a hopeful thing for me that we can continue to expand that throughout, throughout the state. And again, I think the folks in the legislature are trying to support that where they can across the entire budget issue.
Okay, I'm going to cut the questions off at this point. Hopefully that's okay. Thank you all for coming. Let's give these folks all a round of applause. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. We hope you've learned a lot this morning. I certainly have. And if you have a desire to get involved with League's advocacy in this area, contact us to join our efforts as a member or a non-member. Both are welcome. In closing, I'd like to share one of our committee's findings. Over and over, as we talked with interviewees from the various groups or agencies, we heard one particular theme. Door County has very good cross-system collaborations. While state laws and regulations and HIPAA laws sometimes make that challenging, generally the agencies and organizations in the county work well together creatively to help their clients. League hopes to work to identify roadblocks and needs in these systems and to push for change to remove impediments that get in the way of success. While we support citizens who have mental health and substance use issues in their families, that's of course the right thing to do. But improving these outcomes is also a tremendous benefit to our community, and we ask you to join us in these efforts. Thank you for your time.